So if I talk about salt analysis, first is dry test, next is wet test. Dry test and wet test. Now when we talk about dry test, what we need to do? We need to take dry salt, normal regular dry salt, in dry state, in solid state. When we talk about wet analysis, what we need to do? We need to take few amount of salt, few grams, few milligrams of salt. We need to add that salt into water so that a new salt is generated, that is known as original solution or aqueous solution. Okay? So when we talk about dry state, we need solid phase salt. And when I talk about wet test, solid salt plus water gives original solution. And then this original solution we will take in small amount in a test tube. Then we will perform different tests. What are different tests? There are two different tests. Preliminary test, confirmatory test. But I am not very sure that iron is sulfate ion or not. So initial test that I will do is preliminary test. Whether the salt is sulfate or not, I have to check. Once I confirm that salt is sulfate salt, then I will do confirmatory test so that I can exactly say that sulfate is the original anion. There is no other anion other than sulfate. Okay? This is the case of wet test and dry preliminary test and confirmatory test. But if I talk about dry test, first is physical examination. Physical examination. Now what is physical examination? Suppose I have a salt. I can see the texture of salt, the color of salt. I can smell the salt, and by smell I can say which type of salt is there. That means physical touch, the appearance, the smell, the color. These are in physical examination. Then comes flame test. When I talk about flame test is nothing but the salt. I need to combine the salt with HCl. Now, why only HCl? We will discuss this in flame test. I need to combine the salt with flame test. With HCl. We need to make a paste. That paste on platinum wire we need to coat, and we need to keep that in the flame. Bessener burner. You have seen Bessener burner? The structure is somewhere like this. Small, there is a stand and there is a small flame. Okay, so we need to keep that salt in the flame. The flame generates different color. That is known as flame test. After flame test, we have another test, that is borax bead test. Similar to borax bead test, there is another compound known as microcosmic bead test. Out of borax bead test and microcosmic bead test, borax bead test is very important. Procedure is same, observation is same, but only difference is in borax bead test we have a compound named borax, and in microcosmic bead test we have a compound named microcosmic. Okay? Then comes our next test, dry heating test. In flame test, what we did? We took a salt, we combined the salt with HCl, we made a paste, we applied the paste on platinum wire and we kept that in the flame. This is the procedure we have done. But for dry heating test, we are directly using the salt, keeping on a small spoon made up of platinum, and we are directly entering the spoon in the flame. This will directly generate some sound, chit, 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 some sound like this, or some bubbly sound. Suppose you have Amazon parcel, and in that parcel a wrapper comes with the bubbles, and when you burst the bubbles, some sound comes. So that sound is basically observed in dry heat test. Okay, then cobalt nitrate test, charcoal cavity test. These are less important tests. When we talk about cobalt, when we talk about charcoal cavity test, what is charcoal? We are using coke, the coke form of carbon, and we are reacting with the salt and charcoal. This will produce a result because charcoal or coke is C. It behaves as oxidizing or reducing. Which? Coke behaves as oxidizing agent or reducing agent? Reducing agent, na? Coke will accept oxygen and it will reduce other, correct? And the same test is conducted by cobalt nitrate test, where we, instead of using a coke form, we are using cobalt nitrate. Okay, this is the explanation of dry heat test, dry test. When we talk about wet test, preliminary and confirmatory. Now, both preliminary and confirmatory tests are done for cations and anions, and they are classified into different groups: group 1, group 2, group 3, group 5, group 4, group 0. They are divided into different groups where common cations and common anion are classified into same group, and they are reacted with group reagent. Group reagent means common leader of the group that can handle all types of salt. Okay, and then final test is done. Clear? This is the scenario of salt analysis.